Looks like this generation's slowly coming to an end and the next generation is on its way. I'd say I'm gonna miss this generation, but that'd be a bold-faced lie. If anything, I can't wait for it to end. It would appear that Nintendo's gonna make the first move this time. Sony and Microsoft don't seem to be saying much about their next console. Maybe to see what Nintendo's gonna do first and how they're gonna do it. Pretty smart move. I'm actually a little curious myself as to how Nintendo's gonna start the next generation. Done right, they could end up taking a lot of Microsoft and Sony's fan base. Done wrong, it could be Nintendo's last generation. Well, looks like it's about time. The Nintendo Wii U, the first piece of hardware that'll open the entryway to the 8th generation of gaming. Should we even be excited for the next generation? We really don't know what'll happen, and at this point all we can really do is make assumptions. The Wii U might be a good console that can take over the next generation and leave Microsoft and Sony in the dust, but it could also be a failed project that forces Nintendo to take the Sega route, if you will. With Nintendo getting a head start, will first-person shooters continue to be the dominant gaming genre that most developers follow in some way, shape, or form? Or, dare I say, will another genre take over? Of course, I don't really see that happening, but it's possible. There are a lot of questions, but the main one is, what can we really expect from the Wii U next generation? One of the main things we really gotta ask ourselves is, what will the Wii U offer that'll bring the Sony and Microsoft fans to it? Will better third-party support do the job? Will their graphic superiority over the PS3 and Xbox 360 be enough? Or will it take more than that, and if so, what exactly? Speaking of graphic superiority, that does bring up an interesting question about the PS3. One of the things we've all heard and read is that PS3's graphic limitations still haven't been reached. If that's the case, then what game will developers have to make before the limits are reached? While I could be wrong, personally, I don't believe that the PS3's limits haven't been reached, at least not anymore. I believe this statement was a lot easier to accept at the beginning and middle of this generation, as we were all hearing about the Cell processor and how developers weren't really developing their games to push the PS3's limits, as they didn't understand how to develop for it, but this was mainly for multi-plat games and not exclusives. However, now we've seen some incredible looking games on the PS3, yet it's still being claimed that the PS3's limits haven't been reached yet. Is this statement true and PS3's limits really haven't been reached, or is Sony simply trying to play it safe by playing the waiting game to see what all Nintendo and to an extent Microsoft is planning to do? Sony may have learned from their mistakes this generation and might be waiting so they don't repeat them. We know that the 8th generation battle is on its way and that Nintendo's gonna throw the first punch, but will Nintendo be able to hit their target? It seems like the one mistake Nintendo made and learned from this generation is the importance of third-party support. Yes, I'm aware they didn't really need it this generation, but the tactic Nintendo used this generation may not work next generation. So trying to get the Sony and Microsoft crowd by releasing the next Nintendo console before the others may be the better plan. Hell, it worked for Microsoft, didn't it? Remember guys, a good percentage of Microsoft's fanbase this generation was Sony's fanbase just one generation ago. It's quite obvious that Mario, Metroid, and Zelda fans, that's me, are excited for a new version of those games on a more powerful console. And I'm sure Nintendo knows this, but what about the people that play games casually? How will Nintendo get people who game 30 minutes a day, if that, to buy a whole new console to play for another 30 minutes a day? There's no question that Nintendo was successful in bringing in a new group of people and turning them into gamers, but getting those exact same people to get excited by a new console might prove to be quite difficult. And this may explain why Nintendo is not only trying to get the hardcore fan base from Sony and Microsoft, but also why they're making the first move next generation. As I'm sure if they wait until after Sony and Microsoft release their consoles, it would be more difficult to pull this off. But I can't help but see a problem here. Now, most of you guys already know how I feel about shooters, so I'm not going to go into a long rant about that. But I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen next gen. This generation, Microsoft released their console first. With the different games it had, what made it stand out the most were mainly shooters, be they first or third person, exclusive or multiplat. Sony was normally the console that had a lot of diversity, but even with that, as we can see, even they were trying to fight fire with fire. However, Nintendo didn't really seem to do that. There are exclusive shooters for the Wii and even multiplats, but shooters didn't really carry Nintendo this generation. While in the past Nintendo did have the support from a lot of developers that are now developing for Sony and Microsoft, this generation Nintendo was actually carried by, well, Nintendo. And since we know Nintendo's going first this time, they may be able to start a new trend, i.e. make a new genre take over as the main genre like shooters did this generation that Microsoft and Sony might have to follow to keep up. However, the problem is if Nintendo starts a new genre trend with a game they developed, then Sony and Microsoft may not be able to truly follow Nintendo, but instead will have to try their best to mimic them. But as we've seen this generation, when companies try to mimic something being done by another company, if the main fan base doesn't care about what's being mimicked, then it never works out the way the company may have wanted it to. That's why Killzone couldn't really steal the Halo fanbase and Mod Nation Racers couldn't steal the Mario Kart fanbase. No question they were fun games that I'm sure built up their own fanbase, but they just couldn't take the fans away from the other games that easily. Then there's the hardware. When it comes to hardware this generation, Nintendo and the Wii remind me somewhat of Apple. They developed the Wii the way they did because they knew exactly how they were going to use it. This is why games made by Nintendo didn't have a problem using the Wii and its motion controls, but third-party developers didn't have it as easy since they may not have expected Nintendo to do what they did this generation. But regardless of Nintendo doing this, as we can all see, it worked. And you know what? I think what'll make Nintendo's job a lot more difficult next generation is the fact that their plan this generation actually worked out so well. Maybe even too well. What do I mean? You see guys, when it comes to the Nintendo Wii, I've always split its fan base into two separate groups, the Wii fans and the Nintendo fans. While both fans do in fact support the same console, their reasoning behind it is completely different. A Wii fan to me is a person who wasn't a Nintendo fan and, to an extent, a gamer beforehand. In other words, a Wii fan wasn't a gamer at all until the start of this generation when the Wii was introduced as a gaming console for everyone, which in turn brought non-gamers to the Wii. A Nintendo fan, however, bought the Wii for the same reason they bought the NES, the Super NES, the Nintendo 64, or the GameCube. They are fans of Nintendo games, which makes sense that they would be excited for the Wii U. After all, it's going to be the next generation Nintendo. The problem is, while it'll be easy for Nintendo to get the Nintendo fans to go from the Wii to the Wii U, I can almost guarantee it won't be as easy to get the Wii fans to do the same thing. Yeah, a lot of us are saying, oh boy, I can't wait to play the next Mario, Zelda, Metroid, and what have you on the new Nintendo console. But how many casual gamers are saying, oh boy, I can't wait to play the new Wii Sports on the Wii U, if they actually make it? How will Nintendo convince Wii fans to buy the Wii U? Just knowing there was going to be a new Nintendo console was all it took to get the Nintendo fanbase excited. But the Wii fanbase may be asking, why bother? The Wii does all I need it to do. When you look at it this way, Nintendo's actions with the Wii U tend to make more sense. They may already know that it won't be easy to get the casual gamers to follow them to the next console. But if they aim the Wii U at not only the Wii and Nintendo fans, but the Microsoft and Sony fanbase as well, that may give them a better chance. If the rumors that Microsoft and Sony won't be releasing their console for another year or two are true, then ask yourself how many gamers are willing to wait that long for a new console. Chances are, they'll probably get the Wii U. It seems a lot of negative comments have been made about the Wii U's controller. I don't really see the controller as a problem since a lot of people weren't too excited about the Wiimote and Nunchuck, and Nintendo easily found a way to fix that problem. If Nintendo has a lot more third-party support next generation, then I'm almost certain new controllers will be made for the Wii U by other developers. Kind of like how there's PS3 types of controllers made for the Xbox 360 and 360 types of controllers made for the PS3. To me, the biggest fault the Wii U has, however, is its name. To try and bring in Sony and Microsoft's hardcore fanbase by using the same title as its predecessor may give a lot of people the wrong idea about the console itself. Those who didn't buy the Wii because they made the assumption it was a console for casual gamers only might come to the same conclusion with the Wii U. I understand why they stuck with the name Wii, since if they're to even have a chance at selling this console to Wii fans, not to be confused with Nintendo fans, removing Wii from the title could vastly decrease their chances of them buying it, as they probably wouldn't even know it was made by the same company. However, I think naming it Wii U doesn't really sound so much like a new console as it does a new peripheral. You know, like the Sega 32X. There's no question that Nintendo's still trying to appeal to everyone. And while I may be wrong, I get the feeling this will go one way or the other. If this console ends up appealing to the casual crowd, it won't appeal to the hardcore. And if it appeals to the hardcore crowd, the casuals won't even give it a second look. Needless to say, there are plenty of positives and negatives for this console, and I believe right now it can go in any direction. But none of us really know everything about this console just yet. We all know it's going to be first, and that could be a good or bad thing. It could be easy for developers to use, or it could end up suffering the same problem the PS3 did. If the Wii U ends up getting a lot of the multiplats the PS3 and Xbox 360 get, it might be possible for the Wii U, like the PS3 at the start of this generation, to get the worst versions of multiplats, where despite being the stronger console, its true strength won't be taken advantage of, and the multiplats that do go to the Wii U may end up being ported from a weaker console, which would prevent the Wii U's power from really being used. And Nintendo probably won't use all of the Wii U's power either. As good as the Zelda demo that a lot of us saw at E3 looked, that demo didn't show what the Wii U was truly capable of, but that was only because Zelda's visual theme was never really meant to look realistic. Same with Mario and Metroid. And because of this, I get the feeling that we really won't know the Wii U's true power until a company other than Nintendo makes a game that shows what the Wii U is actually capable of doing. This may end up with Nintendo catering to the casual gamers and Nintendo fans and letting the third-party developers take care of the rest, as while I doubt Nintendo's style of games won't be able to bring the Sony and Microsoft crowd over, the third-party developers will. So it may end up working out for everyone. Think about it. All it would really take for starters is one new Call of Duty game for the Wii U, and they're pretty much sold. The Wii U may end up having a pretty rough start due to some doubts people may have. How many of you are going to get the Wii U on release day, and how many of you are going to wait a little bit and see what happens first? All in all, it might just be a waiting game. My hypothesis on the Wii U's release is this. When it's released, chances are all Nintendo fans will in fact say it's the best thing ever. The Wii fans won't really care, as they'll feel the Wii is all they need. The Sony and Microsoft crowd won't care, since they'll expect the Nintendo crowd to say that. If anyone will convince Sony and Microsoft's hardcore fans, it'll be the third-party developers. If they end up making better versions of multiplats on the Wii U, this would turn a few heads away from Sony and Microsoft and towards Nintendo. However, if Sony and Microsoft reveal, or people just find out, what the next generation PlayStation or Xbox has to offer, and it turns out to be better than that of the Wii U, then chances are they may just hold out until the next generation PlayStation and Xbox are released. I'm real curious as to what Sony and Microsoft plan to do next generation, but with the lack of info we have due to them staying quiet about it, we'll have to wait a bit to find out. For all we know, we may end up seeing a flip-flop for the consoles. Nintendo could end up getting the hardcore fan base from Microsoft and Sony next generation due to third-party support, and Microsoft may end up with the casual fan base due to Kinect. Either way, next generation's outcome will be interesting to say the least.